Mesentery on the outside. What's that mesentery called? So you can only see half of it here. That's called the greater omentum. Greater omentum, okay. Now there's more mesentery on the other side. See that gray material on the other side? That's another mesentery. What's that called?
Lesser.
Was it?
Is it the lesser omentum?
Meso. Right, meso, it's called a mesocolon or mesentery, right? Additional structures that allow for the ability for these organs to stick together a little better. Okay. All right. Good. All right, how about this gland over on the side there?
Lochnerman. Parotid.
Parotid. Parotid, this is one of the primary salivary glands. He has a duct here, and it makes its way into the upper area of the teeth, usually around the second or third molar. So the saliva comes in from the top. Then we have two underneath the tongue, submandibular and sublingual. Okay, you can't see them very well here, unfortunately. Okay. All right, then we get into the liver. Liver itself looks like that. It's located in the upper right quadrant. So this is, what section is this called? Right, this is the right lobe. This is the left lobe. Remember that the human has 4 lobes. So this is the greater one. This is the right lobe, left lobe. You turn it to the back, right? We have 2 other lobes. One that looks like a tail. It's called the caudate lobe. And the one that's smaller here, this is called a quadrate. Caudate and quadrate. You can also see the gallbladder in there as well. All right. All right.
You want us to know the cystic duct?
So who's the what?
The cystic duct on the kidney. You need to, because you put that on here.
Let's see, got the gallbladder, pancreas, salivary glands, difference between retro and intraperitoneal, mesocolon. How about this white structure? What's that called? That's called the falciform ligament. This is the ligament that is a remnant of the umbilical cord. It usually is an artery. Actually, it's a vein. It's a vein, but then once the baby is born, it turns into connective tissue. Falciform ligament is what it's called. So we got the omentums, we got the greater colon, we got the salivary glands. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have any brush border models. Know all the sphincters. What's unusual about the stomach? Huh?
It has 3 different
3
layers.
muscle layers, right? All the other digestive organs like the esophagus, etc., all have 2 layers, longitudinal and circular. What the stomach has also an oblique as well, right? So 3 sections, you should be able to know that. Gallbladder, pancreas, okay. Cecum, appendix, liver. Hey, that's it. So you know all those structures, you're good with the digestive system. Okay.
No surprises, right?
Huh?
No surprises, right?
No surprises.
Just that.
Okay, moving on to the kidney. Right, so the outer covering, what's that called?
cortex.
Called the fibrous capsule, right? Up there, fibrous capsule, connective tissue. We make our way to the inside. Most of these structures usually have an outer area and an inner area, right? What's this outer area called?
That's the
Renal
cortex.
cortex.
Cortex. Renal cortex is good. How about the inner area?
Medulla.
Medulla. Okay. Those that we have vessels. We have one vessel here that seems to arch around this structure. What's this structure, first of all? Pyramids, right? So we have about 7 or 8 pyramids. You can see this is nice because it shows you a three-dimensional look. It looks like a funnel. And it really is because it's filled with these striations. What are these striations?
Minor?
Collecting ducts. Right? The urine actually is filtered here in the cortex and it makes its way into the first capture area. What's the first capture area for urine?
Major calyx?
Minor calyx.
Oh.
And then we get into the major calyx, and then we get into the renal pelvis, and then we get into the ureter. Okay. So again, these striations are collecting ducts, right? So the majority of the, what is the unit of the kidney? What's that called? The working unit of the kidney. The nephron. Right? There are 1 million nephrons per kidney. Right? The majority of the nephron is located up in this structure. Right? The blood itself makes its way through this artery. What's this artery called? Yeah, arcuate. It arches, arcuate. And then the arteries that emanate, it looks like they kind of radiate. That's what they're called, radiate arteries. Right? It's those radiate arteries that eventually make their way into the nephrons, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. How about the arteries on the outside? What's this one's called?
Renal artery.
And then this one?
The vein.
Vein. Okay. All right. Now when we start coming in here, what's this artery called? Pretty large.
And it starts with I, right?
Segmental. It's called the segmental artery. There is no segmental vein, right? And then we have lobar, and then we have arcuates, and then we have radiate. So you should know those arteries and veins, all right? Okay. So again, the radiate arteries, you can see that they're making their way. This will be a radiate artery here, and you can see that there's a radiate vein in here as well. You can see it produces this structure that makes its way into the nephron. This is one of the nephrons. What's this structure of the nephron called?
The glomeruli.
Bowman's capsule or renal corpuscle? Okay,
You'll take either?
renal corpuscle, huh?
You would take either of them?
Yeah,
let's go.
either one, that's good, right? What's the name of this artery? It's going inside. Therefore, it's called the afferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole, right? Afferent arteriole itself got about here it is. Right, this is it here. This is the afferent arteriole. You can see how muscular it is, right? It controls the blood pressure that's making its way. Again, this is the renal corpuscle, and this part of the renal corpuscle is called Bowman's capsule. And on the inside, this is also part of the renal corpuscle, are these capillaries. What are these capillaries called? Glomerulus, right? On top of the capillaries, we have these specialized cells. What are they called? They actually control the filtration, called podocytes. Okay, podocytes, right? So here comes the afferent arteriole. It makes its way here into the capillaries, controls the blood pressure, and then it makes its way out another artery.
Efferent.
Efferent arteriole, that's right. How about this structure? This tube at the top. Distal, part of the distal convoluted tubule. Remember, it kind of comes back on itself. However, this is the beginning of the proximal convoluted tubule. Wow. Right, This is where all the filtration comes in. This is mostly plasma, right? And then it makes its way down the tubes, basically. So here we actually see the nephrons. You can see the nephrons here at the top. You can see the tubules. Right, here's the proximal tubules. And making its way down. Right, it's making its way down. What's this called? What? No, this is the distal loop of Henle, right? Distal loop, or the distal tubule, the distal tubule. You can see it actually curves around. This is the loop of
Henle.
Henle. And then we have the ascending loop. You can see it comes back around, and then it begins to become convoluted again. Again, because it's distant, it's called the distal convoluted tubule. That's what this is here. You can see it's associated with the vessel, right? And then makes its way around into the
Collecting
duct. You can see that there are many nephrons associated with this one collecting duct. Okay? You can see this is the pyramid. Okay, the striations that you see here, those are all collecting ducts for the most part. Okay? What's this section of the pyramid called?
Click.
Papilla. Right, it's the papilla, which leads into the minor calyx from this point on. Right? This is where the urine begins to drip into those capture areas. You can see that we have two nephrons. Right, one has a long loop, and the other one has a short loop. What's this nephron called? Cortical nephron. How about this one with the long loop? Juxtamedullary nephron, right? Again, they're only 15%, this one's 85%. They all look the same, the only difference is this is long loop. There's also another difference. Notice all the capillaries associated with the primarily the proximal, and in this particular case, some of the descending loop. What's the name of these capillaries? Peritubular capillaries, okay. Now we move over to the juxtamedullary. Everything pretty much stays the same except it has a longer loop, which means it has more blood vessels here. More blood vessels. They have another name for those blood vessels. Right here. What's the name of these blood vessels down here? Notice they're kind of straight, what they're called, right? Vasa recta. Vasa meaning vessels and recta meaning straight vessels. Only found on the juxtamedullary nephrons, okay? All right. So these are the models I would use, okay? Let's see. Good. Ureters, okay. Then of course we have, here are the kidneys, right? What's the top of the kidney? What's that? Adrenal gland, right? Adrenal glands. How about this blood vessel? What is it? This is the abdominal aorta. Okay. How about the other one?
Inferior vena cava.
Inferior vena cava. Very good. Okay. This is where the renal arteries emanate from, and the veins making their way into the inferior vena cava. Right? So here we have the kidney, and then these are the ureters, and eventually they make their way into the bladder. That's what this is. Notice the bladder just sits atop these bones. What are these bones called? Pubic bones, right? Pubic bones. Take a look inside. It looks like we have undulations on the inside, right? What are these undulations on the inside called? Just like the stomach. They're called rugae, right? You can see that when the ureters make their way into the bladder, you can actually see them here. This comes in here, and then it comes in here, goes in here. And then the urine makes its way down in the ureter. It forms a triangle. What's that triangle called? Trigon. Trigon, okay. And this structure? You think this is a male or a female?
It's a female.
No. It's, how can you distinguish it male from the male and female? Well, females don't have this. This is the prostate gland. Right. Prostate gland. So this is a male bladder, okay? So what's the tube called that's going through the prostate? It's the beginning of the series of urethras. This one, since it's going through the prostate, it's called the prostatic urethra, okay? All right. Also, there's a muscle associated with the bladder that helps you pee. It's a smooth muscle, and it's called the detrusor muscle. D-E-T-R-U-S-O-R, detrusor muscle. And so when you activate the pee process, the muscle itself automatically helps to evacuate the urine. Okay. Let's see. There's still a lot of studying to do here. So all of these structures were named in this study guide, right? You'd make a copy for yourself again and send it, it's on Canvas.
Well, don't forget those babies over there.
We'll get to those.
Okay.
Think they're part of the urinary system?
Oh,
Female. Yes, I do. I'm just saying, get to 'em.
Okay, now we're gonna make our way to the reproductive system, okay? So,
Smart.
let's do the male reproductive system first. Well, you can see that we have these structures. What are these
Testes.
structures called?
Testicles.
Testes, okay? And on the testes, you have this comma-like structure. What's that called? Epididymis, right? Remember when the sperm is produced in the testes, it makes its way here into the head of the epididymis, and it goes down into the tail eventually. And then from the tail, right, it produces a tube. You can't really see it too well, but the tube comes up through the, what are these called? One here, there's one on the other side. See, it's filled with blood vessels, nerve fibers, spermatic cord. It's called spermatic cords. In the spermatic cord, of course, there is the tube. You can see it making its way around the pubic bone. See, it's making its way around here. It makes its way eventually into this particular area. Okay, it's really hard to see here with this thing here. Here we go. It's a little better on this side. So what's this tube called? It's the vas deferens. The vas deferens eventually makes its way here into this structure, which is the ampulla of the vas deferens. This is where we got reservoirs of sperm that actually make its way in here, okay? Notice it's associated with this structure. What's this structure called? Seminal vesicle, right? Remember that we have to add fluid to the sperm, right? Once we start the ejaculation process, the sperm comes floating out and it mixes with this fluid that comes in from the seminal fluid. About 70% of the fluid that makes up the semen, 70% comes from this structure. It's very muscular, so there's a lot of movement of the muscles during the ejaculation process, part of the orgasm basically, right? It's going to eventually make their way through this structure. And it's going to add another 30% of fluid. What's this structure called? Again, it's just below the bladder. That's the prostate. It has to make its way through the prostate, and then the prostatic urethra, right, and then eventually make its way through the penis, which is the spongy urethra at this point. Okay. Also, you can see blood vessels, right? These are the testicular testicular arteries, and on the other side we have this unusual looking pattern of venous vessels. Remember that the sperm, in order to be produced, they need temperatures less than the interior temperature of the body, like 3 degrees less. So when the arterial blood makes its way down through the spermatic cord, some of the heat is taken up by these veins. It's a complex, it's a plexus of veins. So once the arterial blood reaches the testes, it's cooler. What of those veins called? Those are called piniform veins. Piniform veins. Okay. Of course, there's one on the right spermatic cord and there's one on the left spermatic cord, basically. All right, so we now remove the penis. When we take a look inside, we can see these blue structures. Again, those are the structures that will engorge in blood to allow for an erection to take place. What are those structures called? Corpora cavernosa. Okay. So we don't want the spongy urethra to collapse under the weight of all that blood. So it also has spongy material around the urethra. What's that called? That's called corpora spongiosum, right? You guys need a lot of work. This is right here, basically, on this way. You can see the little hole there. That's the spongy urethra, and around it is this specialized tissue. Again, it becomes engorged with blood once an erection takes place, basically. All right, how about the penis? How about the tip of the penis? What's that called? Glans penis. Glans penis. Well, you guys are in trouble here. Okay. Yeah, we're moving along. All right, so you need to know all of those structures. Let's see if I missed anything here.
I'm done. I can't do no more.
All right, next is the female reproductive system. Okay. The external genitalia of the female. Right. You begin to look on the inside. You can see it's very close to the rectum. Here's the anus right there, rectum. Very close to the rectum is this structure. What's that? Women. Come on, women. What's that? Uterus. Okay. Associated with the uterus, you can actually see ligaments. What are these ligaments called?
Fallopian tube.
Well, since they're associated with the ovary, they're called ovarian ligaments. All right? So you can see the ovary in here. It's that yellow portion on the inside there. That is the right ovary, and then there's the left ovary on the other side. Right? You can see they're surrounded by the uterine tube or the fallopian tube. What's this structure here, like little fingers that surround the ovary? What are these called? Fimbriae, which gives rise to this area, infundibulum, and then a little bit further down we have the ampulla of the uterine tube. And the ampulla is where fertilization takes place. And then we make our way down the uterine tube. That section that associates with the uterus, what's that little section called? It's very thin. Right in there. It's called the isthmus. And then it dumps into the uterus, basically. Okay. Take it apart. You can see, look on the inside. You can see that the uterus is very close to the rectum here. Okay. Here's the vagina. And then we have the uterus, right? Retroverted uterus. Right on top of the bladder. And then we have the urethra for the female. So she has 2 separate tubes for urinating and one for copulation. Or as Big Bang likes to call it, coitus. Coitus. And Somebody watched The Big Bang. That's what's wrong with The Big Bang. Okay. Hey, that's pretty much it for the female. Or I could use some of these structures. Right? If I took a look at these, like these guys, right? If you take a look at the structures on the outside, again, you can just see tubes. These are the fallopian tubes on the outside here. This would be the ligament, the ovarian ligaments. You can see the baby is developing here, right? This would be the placenta over here on this side, right? So the baby would be in this sac. What's this sac called?
Amniotic.
Amniotic sac, and the fluid on the inside?
Amniotic.
Amniotic fluid. Right. So I wouldn't ask you questions as to, you know, how old this baby is or how many, you know, I wouldn't ask questions like that. So I would just use this for anatomical things, basically. And that's basically all I would ask for those structures. Okay. All right. Test these, I've done this. That's it.
No, that breast.
The what?
That funny looking breast thing. We don't need that.
The bread.
Breast.
Oh, the breast. Oh, yeah. I actually don't have any questions on the breast.
Perfect.